All right. Well, welcome everyone to the traffic calming meeting for Branch Street and Maxey Lane. We're hosting this meeting virtually. It's June 10th, 2024 at 6 p.m. My name is David Greaves, and I work with NDOT on their traffic calming program. So going to be facilitating this meeting tonight, and then ultimately I'll be doing the design for the project. So let's dive in. We're going to start with just a pretty general overview on the program for anyone who's not familiar. But if no one's aware, traffic calming is a program run through NDOT that focuses on residential streets. So we don't really mess with the Gallatin Pikes of the world, even like kind of larger collectors like McGavick Pike nearby are kind of off the table due to the volume of traffic they see. But more like low volume residential, low speed roads is sort of what this program is for. We focus on physical solutions that encourage lower speeds over significant lengths. So what that means is we prefer to use design and engineering, devices to slow traffic with like a physical object rather than lower speed limits or signs or relying on tickets and things. And then significant lengths, that just means we don't tend to do these projects block by block. We'll usually either choose like a whole street or several consecutive blocks of a street when they apply. And then finally, the main goal of this program is speed reduction. And that has some impacts on safety that we'll discuss a little bit later. There are 3 E's of traffic calming. Those are education, enforcement, and engineering. Engineering here is big, bold, and underlined because that's really what NDOT has the most control over in their day-to-day. So we're here to sort of engineer a solution for us that's going to help address the program's goals. Certainly, we can do education. This meeting is an example of that, sort of talking to neighbors about why speeding is dangerous and why we don't want, really fast cars driving in our neighborhoods. And then lastly, there's enforcement. And that's the one that NDOT doesn't have the ability to do a whole lot of. It's pretty much in the court of Metro Nashville Police Department. And while we'd love for them to be able to, just spend all day, every day writing speeding tickets, they've got a lot of other responsibilities on their plate. So we like to design things that'll be, acting all the time to reduce speeds. Circling back a bit to why our main goal is speed reduction, that ultimately feeds into just general safety. So this slide is called Safety and Vision Zero because traffic calming is a program in pursuit of Vision Zero. For anyone who doesn't know, that's just the concept that nobody should have to die or seriously be injured on Nashville's streets. The reason speed is so important to that aim is that the chances that one would die if they were struck by a car, they increase exponentially as speed increases. So we can see kind of on the left that 25-mile-an-hour range, someone hit has a chance of dying, but 89% chance of survival is not so bad. Unfortunately, that probability goes way down as we get up into that 35-mile-an-hour range, and then certainly the 45-mile-an-hour range. 2 times out of 3, that person isn't going to survive. So we really want to, know about streets in Nashville where people are going that fast. And then ultimately, if that's somewhere where people want to walk, like a neighborhood, for instance, we want to get those speeds back down to a more appropriate level for the context. This is a really popular program. So when this street was selected, there were over 480 applications in the queue. And then there were 25 selected in the spring of 2024. So off to the right, you can see that's a map of Davidson County. And every colored line on there is a traffic calming project. The dark blue ones are ones that have been implemented already. The magenta ones are those that have applied but not yet been selected. And there's a couple other colors in there that describe the stages in between. So I think y'all would show up as like green on this map because we're currently doing the design and meetings. So there are a few things that the traffic calming program can offer as solutions to speeding in this neighborhood, but there's a lot of other things that NDOT can do, and then certainly Metro Nashville government as a whole can do. And just about any of that can be accessed through Hub Nashville. So we want to make sure everyone's aware of this app because it can be really helpful for things that we're not able to address as part of our design. So should anything come up like sidewalks or maybe like signal requests, things like that, I may remind everyone that this is a resource that's available. You can access it by phone by calling 311. There's also a website, that'd be hub.Nashville.gov. And then my preferred way is by using their app on your cell phone. It's fairly user friendly and easy to make new requests. So a little bit about how Branch Street and Maxey Lane were selected. When you all applied, we went out and collected some data about speeds, volumes. We also took a look at the surroundings of the road. And all that kind of goes into this pie chart that represents the formula we use to rank all of those 480 plus streets to figure out which ones are really the most in need of traffic calming right now. So the biggest slice of the pie, that's vehicular speeds. I'd say that's the largest because we know that's generally what causes, that like high level of danger in collisions. Volume, that's just how many cars are driving on the road. That's another big piece of the puzzle because if you have a few cars driving really fast, that's obviously less dangerous than lots of cars driving really fast. So we like to consider the volume as well. And then there's three smaller slices. Those are vulnerable user injuries and fatalities. That'd be like if a pedestrian or a cyclist was hit at some point in the past. Non-driver accommodations, that's do you have sidewalks on the street? And then trip destinations, that'd be parks and schools. So we know that those two uses are things that generally people would like to be able to walk to. So we want to make sure that we're accommodating for that while we're scoring these. And I think that you all do have both the park and the school on your street. So I'm guessing you got some points for those. So some of the data we collected is an 85th% speed of 32 miles an hour. That's pretty fast for the speed limit of 25, about 7 over. I will say it's not the fastest we've seen in this program, so we're somewhat relieved that you aren't experiencing like really severe speeding, but certainly 32 is nothing to sneeze at, and we'd really like people to be driving closer to the speed limit. A volume of 1090 vehicles a day. That's another one that while it seems like a lot, certainly over 1,000 vehicles driving over a period of 24 hours, isn't nothing. The range in this program goes up to about 5,000. So I'd say this is in the lower half of the streets that are selected. And then you've got a very variable street width. Narrowest is about 16 feet. That's really tight. Certainly not quite enough room for two cars to like comfortably pass each other at speed, and then goes up to 21 feet, and even that is still relatively narrow. That's about 2 normal size travel lanes. So narrow road. I'll talk about how that can kind of impact the options at our disposal, but basically that's what we've seen at our first initial look at Branch Street and Maxey Lane. I want to take a pause just to take any questions about what we've covered so far before we start getting into the concept we have proposed or talking about some of the tools in the toolbox. Does anyone have any questions? All right, sounds like we can charge ahead. I will say if anyone would prefer to use the chat, I've got that open, so I'll see it if anyone messages a question in there. and I'll find a time to pause and get it answered. But either way, you're more than welcome to come off mute as well if you prefer. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a map of the project. It goes from Cahal Avenue to the south, all the way up to the end of Branch Street, and then 90s over to Maxey Lane until it meets up with McGavick Pike. Maxey Lane, of course, is just added on because it's a continuous, run of street. So we didn't want to, leave it off and have the project feel less complete than it could have been. It looks like you'll have quite a bit of traffic calming already installed in your neck of the woods. So those two dotted blue lines, those would be traffic calming projects that are complete with vertical measures. So that'd be Lytton Avenue, and it looks like Burns Street, if I'm reading that correctly. Off to the right and to the left, you can see a lot of streets have applied, but not yet been selected. That'd be like the Scott Avenue and Otay Street. So we'll keep measuring and analyzing that data that we've collected for those streets, and they may eventually be selected as well. So I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about some of the tools we have in our toolbox. I'll spend time on the ones that I think will have a higher chance of making it into the final design, and sort of share the tools that may not be options given the street's width a little more briefly. But feel free, as always, to ask any questions that come up. I'll try to cover the gist, but not go like way down into all the details unless anyone wants to. So anyway, the first tool we talk about is speed cushions. These really are, at this point, kind of the default option for a normal traffic calming project. And the reason for that is we know they work really well. NDOT over the last few years has gotten a lot of experience installing these, and then ultimately on the streets when they're applied, we sort of see the results that we're looking for. They're basically speed bumps about 3 inches high, but then stretched way out to a length of either 7, 10.5, or 14 feet, depending on kind of the target speed we're going for. And the reason for that is we don't want folks like really coming to a crawl before they go over these. Driving around 20 miles an hour, 25, hitting these should be just fine. So that's why they're stretched way out like that instead of kind of the 1 foot long speed bumps you might see in like a parking lot or something similar. They're 6 feet wide, and that's really deliberate. Essentially, that's kind of the sweet spot between affecting smaller personal vehicles that we all might drive, but not having as large of an impact on larger like emergency vehicles like a fire truck or an ambulance. The thought is with those large vehicles, they have a wheelbase that's wide enough, maybe not to completely clear the gaps there, but at least be able to roll over those tapered sides and not have to slow down as much. Next is speed tables. These essentially are exactly like speed cushions. You can probably tell they're made of the same material. The difference is they don't have those gaps in them. So they do have a slowing effect on emergency vehicles where the speed cushions may not have that effect quite as much. We tend to avoid these for that reason. We may put them in certain cases, like if the street had sort of an awkward width where we weren't able to get a speed cushion configuration we were satisfied with. We may lean on speed tables, but nowadays they tend to be used fairly sparingly in the traffic calming program. Like I mentioned, NDOT prefers this measure as sort of the starting point for a traffic calming design because they've gotten good evidence that they have the intended effect. So what we're looking at here are the results of 6 studies that they did on traffic calming projects around Nashville, where they installed those 6 by 7 foot speed cushions and then took readings before they were installed and after to see how the speeds were affected. So we can see the average speed was 31 miles an hour, and that was reduced down to 22. And then the 85th speed was 37, reduced down to 25. Now, in case anyone is wondering, the 85th percent speed, that works kind of like a median might. Basically, it's just 15% of people that were measured were going faster than that number, and then 85% were going slower than that number. So the reason that we use it is because it tends to shed the outlying data a little better than an average might. So you could imagine, say, like the mailman was driving at 1 mile an hour. That wouldn't change the 85th percent speed, but it would bring the average down a little bit. So that's why we like to report both. Some non-vertical measures that we sometimes mix into designs to either sort of supplement or in some cases make up the whole design in spots where like speed cushions or tables aren't an option that are available. Radar feedback signs is kind of a big one. We've all probably seen these before, but the way they work is it's a solar-powered radar device that measures your speed and then displays that back to you on an LED screen. These can work pretty well if it's an area where speeding is caused just by like a large hill, or perhaps the road is really wide and people just wind up sort of subconsciously speeding. They don't, however, do anything to like physically stop someone from speeding if they are choosing to do so, and they don't have any like enforcement function. They tell you your speed, but they're not able to like write you a ticket if it catches you going too fast. Some other things we can do, this is helpful on really wide streets, is narrowing. So we'll paint white edge lines on the side of the road to kind of shrink the pavement intended for driving down to a narrower width. Generally, when roads are wide, it's much more comfortable to go fast because you have a lot of space to work with, and there's plenty of room for error. On narrow roads, people tend to drive slower just because you have less space to maneuver in, and it's generally just a little more tight. Another benefit these can have is sort of delineating some implied space that you could walk in, and feel that if someone is driving on this side of the line and you're walking on this side of the line, it's a little more comfortable. Certainly, it's not as effective as a sidewalk might be, but that is one benefit that we can also see with these. For really large intersections, we also have things like bulb outs. That works pretty similar to narrowing, just taking a lot of pavement and shrinking it down to a more appropriate amount. One of the benefits these have is reducing turning speeds. So if I have a really wide turning radius, plenty of room to kind of make that turn quickly, that's often what will happen. We find that if we shrink that intersection down, tighten the turn radius up a little bit, you're just not as able to go as fast while making that turn. And that gives you more time to look out for pedestrians or other cars as you're navigating an intersection. Another benefit these have is reducing the distance that a pedestrian would have to cross while they're conflicting with car traffic. So it can improve the walking experience as well. This is another treatment that's a little more appropriate for like wide roads, but chicanes are where we take the center line of a road and sort of zigzag it back and forth. So you can see the sidewalks and the curbs, those are straight. The road used to just be a straight line, but when it was chicaned, now there's a lot more turns having to happen. And that'll slow cars down just by, making them move the steering wheel and pay a little closer attention. Last but not least, we have traffic circles. These are really only appropriate for very large intersections. Reason being, they go in the center of the road and sort of work like bulb outs, but from the inside out. It is pretty difficult to get these in such a way that left turns are still possible for certain vehicles. So we've done them before, certainly where like there's a ton of pavement to work with, but I don't think on Branch Street and Maxey there are any intersections so wide that this would be, a good option. So that's all the tools we have. What we're looking at here is the concept that we're proposing. tonight we'd like to get feedback from you all on sort of what you all are looking for, what you might think of this design, and really anything else we should consider when we go out and do our site visit and ultimately complete the design plans. So I'll take a minute and just sort of explain what's going on here, but feel free to be thinking about any questions or feedback you might have while I do that. So what we're looking at is a series of 7 speed cushions. That's those yellow trapezoids. We space them out around 400 to 500 feet. That's kind of an ideal spacing where it's not so many that you're driving over them constantly, but it's enough that you don't have so much time that you can speed back up to a dangerous speed before getting to the next one. I think we've got a question from Jessica. Jessica, do you want to ask away?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My first question was just why did we scope it? And I think I put this one in the chat. Why did we scope it to stop at Cajal and not to go and continue on for that additional block till the end of Branch? And then my other question is like, how are we going to like in the context of using speed cushions, one of the challenges that I see on the road is that you get the large package cars from FedEx and UPS, as well as the box trucks that have a wider wheel stance that are going to be able to continue to speed past these cushions because they, like emergency vehicles, have those wider, the wider dimensions. And so that is a real challenge because they come tearing around that corner from Maxey onto Branch every day.
Got it. Well, I'll answer the first question first, and that was why did we stop at Cajal instead of continuing on to, this is Porter, right? I think it's Porter. Anyway.
Yes, it is.
So when these projects come to NDOT, the applicants will propose the limits that they're asking for. I don't have the records with me right now, but I suspect that when the street applied, it was from McGavick down to Cajal. I'm not sure. Another possible reason is that I think that section of Branch Street is just 2 businesses and actually like not any residences. And maybe because of that, it was shortened back to Cajal. But I will say that that wasn't something I was intimately involved with. So those are sort of the 2 theories I might have, either that it was applied for this way or perhaps that kind of commercial zone was trimmed off. And then the second question was, should we be worried about like delivery vehicles going fast over these cushions? Perhaps. I wouldn't say that it's something we've heard like a lot of feedback on from projects that have been installed. And when I say that fire trucks and ambulances aren't affected, they are affected some. Basically, the cushions allow some room to get to emergencies quickly, but not so much that we would expect like a van to be able to not slow down at all. So even though these do have gaps for emergency vehicles, we would expect larger vehicles like delivery vans and such to still have to slow down some to navigate these.
Hey, David, I have a question about the turn from Maxey onto Branch. Is there something that can be better installed to delineate I guess, the 2 lanes of traffic? Because I think one issue that we have is, I mean, I'm sure this is due to speed, as people come around the corner or come towards the turn, they don't really slow down. So everybody kind of drives in the middle of the road, which, it being a blind corner, creates some almost head-on accidents every day. So is there a plan to install something there?
It's not something that we've planned for currently, but that's definitely a good thing to know that is, worth paying attention to. We can look into it. I think that y'all have a yellow line down the middle of the street already. Is that right, or is there no yellow line at that spot?
It's a faded yellow line.
Hmm. Okay. Well, it sounds like maybe we should consider refreshing that at the very least. I would say we could consider like some delineators there, but we've tried that before and they get destroyed like pretty fast. So it may not be something that NDOT has a huge appetite to do. One thing that will improve a bit is the speeds that people are going on that stretch. It sounded like y'all had noticed some concerns with people coming off McGavick and then onto Maxey and then onto Branch. Um, so something about this design is McGavick is an arterial road. And that means basically that it's classified to handle a pretty good amount of traffic at a higher speed than we would usually want in neighborhoods. So when we have transitions from arterial roads down to local roads, we do notice there's a lot of speeding at that transition. And I suspect that might be going on a little bit here. Maybe you're used to going 35 and you don't really see a reason to stop going 35 because it's that straight, just straight on to Maxey Lane. Here they will have to go over a set of speed cushions before getting to that turn and hopefully be a little more alert as they're doing that movement. But one thing that we're probably not going to do is like alter the geometry of that road or anything like that, just because it's beyond what a project like this is really equipped to do.
Hi, this is Josh. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Hey, so when you say you're not planning on altering the geometry, does that mean that there's no plans to orient, how can I describe this, where the split between Maxey and McGavick is, to orient that such that it's not just a straight shot from McGavick? It kind of would turn, you'd be forced to turn more onto Maxey and then kind of come, does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it absolutely does. That's definitely something we'll consider. If we do something like that, it will probably be these sorts of materials. So we're not going to like get the jackhammer out and remove any pavement. We can do striping, delineators. If those really get the job done, maybe something like speed bumps there to sort of enforce that turn. That's something we'll look into for sure. Because yeah, I agree with you. That's a good way to sort of and slow it down a bit.
Thank you.
David, is there a reason that we don't, in our kind of set of solutions, include some of the partial one-way designs and things like the spacing and things that happen on Shetland north of here? I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they've got some places where they narrow the road and make it a alternating one-way in that space to kind of force traffic to slow enough to check for oncoming traffic.
Yeah. I am familiar with that project. I think that those in particular have had mixed results. I don't know like the details necessarily, but it's not something that NDOT had such a good experience with in the aftermath that they had an appetite to do a whole lot more. I think one of the main barriers is it's more of a permanent reconfiguration because you're getting out the concrete truck, you're removing pavement and replacing it with grass. And that's like a pretty high commitment if for some reason like that wasn't working for one reason or another. These are intended to be installed pretty quickly, relatively inexpensive to larger infrastructure projects, and then ultimately we don't see these get removed really hardly ever, but they are modular and bolted onto the, so we're not like destroying any of the pavement to put them in. They could come off if necessary. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure, no problem. Anyone else? Next, we're going to talk about kind of the timeline of the project and sort of what the next steps are to implementing. All right. Well, I'll move on to that. Happy to take more questions later on about anything we've covered so far, including tools, designs, all that. So this flowchart here is sort of the diagram of the whole program. As I mentioned, it starts with an application. So residents of the street will get together and apply for traffic calming. And then we do that prioritization and selection process where we collect data, run it through our formula, and rank all those applied streets. And then we're here tonight at the red circle. That's the neighborhood meeting. So after that, we'll do a field review. So we go out to Branch Street and Maxey Lane, take a bunch of measurements, make sure we really understand, like how wide the pavement is, at which places, just get a more personal feel for what else is going on the street, in addition to the feedback that we're collecting tonight. And then after that, we'll sort of take those observations, confirm that any of the assumptions we've made are correct, and ultimately refine the concept design into a set of construction plans. So they're detailed enough that we can give those to our crews and they'll go out and build them. Once we have that design done, we can do one of two things. We can schedule a second neighborhood meeting where we will kind of review some of this information as well as take a look at those construction plans. Have a lot of kind of particulars. You'll sort of see exactly where the cushions might go, find out whether or not that kind of McGavick to Maxey turn situation is addressed. And then after the second meeting, we'll move on to an online ballot where we send mailers to everyone that got invitations to this meeting and ultimately vote. Do we want this project to move forward or do we not want it to move forward? If a second meeting is not wanted, then what we can do is just post the plans online and then send that online ballot to you all, and you'll be able to give them a review before voting one way or another. Any questions about the second meeting versus straight to ballot question? Okay. So during this meeting, I will sort of just ask if anyone feels strongly one way or another, or really if anyone would prefer to have a second meeting. We're happy to do one. But if no one is really like eager to do another one of these, we're also happy to just move on to the balloting as well. It's up to you all, really.
And it seems like from what the options are, this is the option. So I think we should probably, it looks like there's quite a long lead time through this whole process. So just to speed it up, probably move on without a second meeting.
Yeah, I would say that's what the majority of projects are doing. If there are like major changes that we're looking at, usually a second meeting is worthwhile. But if it is going to basically stay the same, it'll save you a month or two to go onto the ballot. But yeah, you raise a good point. Once we go into construction, the time is roughly 8 to 10 months. It's not because it takes 8 to 10 months to build these projects. They really only take a few days to get them into the street. There's just quite a large backlog at the moment that NDOT is working their way through, but it is immense. All right, cool. So we'll plan on finishing up our design, posting the plans, and then letting you all know with these postcards. Some information about these. They're similar to the invites that you all got for this meeting. but they have a unique ID code that you'll plug into Metro's form to make sure you know that you are voting and not someone else voting for you. And then you can also call in if that's preferable. There will be a phone number on the card as well for anyone who'd prefer to do that. Got a question?
Yeah, I've got a question about the voting process.
Sure.
I know it said on the prior page and on this one as well that 66% of respondents vote yes.
Yes.
There are a very large number of rental and vacant properties down the street
Mhm.
where, like, I think like on my side of the street, other than a couple of units, like the rest of the street is basically not owner occupied, and it's only a handful of people who own all the properties.
Mhm.
So who is voting? Is it residents or is it property owners? And
Yeah,
what happens if there's a low response rate in voting?
those are all great questions. I'll skip to the next slide to just kind of answer it with a graphic. So yes, it is residential properties that are occupied. So if any are like visibly under construction, we will not send them a card. And it is the owners of the parcels. So basically, we take this mailing list generator tool that pulls all of the public records from Metro Nashville's public record system. And it's any parcel that is touching the affected right of way. So you can see the ones that have been sort of subdivided into 2 units. The back ones are getting postcards as well. And then any that are like on, looks like there's maybe some corner lots, just any of the, you know, parcels that touch Branch Street or Maxey Lane. Those are getting the mail. If owners own multiple properties, we'll see that like duplicate in the list and just send them one. Certainly you don't get one vote like per property you own. But we do recognize that you know, folks renting would also maybe want a say. In this scenario, we just encourage them to, you know, get with their landlord and express, you know, their opinion one way or the other. But ultimately, it's the owners of those affected parcels that are you know, sent the ballots. I think I had another question from someone before I answered that, but does that answer kind of cover everything you asked?
It does. Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, it's gone off.
No, it's on you.
Yes, I had a question about the Maxey branch at the curve. With many wrecks have been coming on that curve to Branch, Maxey, then Branch on, and then it's a lot of wrecks up there at the corner of Liddon and Branch. The speed, will y'all consider that when you think about putting some slow
Putting the
bumpers
cushions
or
down.
cushions?
Yeah,
When
definitely.
they when there are wrecks, does that be called in on the street that they have the wrecks on?
Oh yeah, so NDOT does have access to all of the accident data that's generated by police reports. If there's an accident and a police report isn't generated, that would go unreported. We don't really have a way of knowing about it if no one tells us. But yes, the accident data is available. We really only look at the pedestrian crashes when selecting streets, because sometimes we found that including like all accident data can skew this in kind of funny ways that don't really, you know, work towards the program's goals. But definitely, we have decided to calm the entire street, knowing that this is one where folks have experienced, you know, some crashes in the past. So we haven't placed cushions like directly at Lytton, but we've done it before and afterwards. I think that's here and here. They should be coming to a full stop when they get to the stop sign. Of course, we know that doesn't always happen. So we're aware of that. And then at the corner here, the bend from Maxey Lane over to Branch, we have cushions both before and after that as well. So before you get to that corner coming either direction, you're going over a speed cushion and hopefully, being slowed down. We can't put cushions like directly on the corner just because you need to be able to see it coming for one. And then we're not as excited about how vehicles behave when there's like kind of that sideways turning force on them at the same time as they're going up and over an object. So we tend to avoid sharp curves like this one, but when we do have those, we put cushions before and after.
Okay, coming down Maxey off of McGavick,
Mhm.
and then you run into Branch.
Yep.
So you're saying there's no way that you probably could put cushions there because that's where most of the wrecks is. They have just removed the pole today from the pole being hit so many times, and then coming in our yard, and then right down Maxey where the curb is just keep tearing up the people that own that home because they're coming down so fast and that curb is so sharp. And then gravels are running down on side of the road behind the restaurants. And when they come on that gravel, they slides.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, that's dangerous because it's a lot of when it rains, the gravels run down. And if a car is coming real fast around that curve and hit those gravels, it has a tendency to either come in our yard, which it has done, and hit this pole right at our driveway, which it has done. Maybe so they just changed it out today, and it's kind of hard for them to stop when they come in so fast. And
Yeah.
also I have little grandchildren in the yard. That worries me too. Great
Yes,
grandchildren.
certainly we never want conditions where folks are running off the road regularly. Here, what we're going to do is put a speed cushion on a Maxey before that curve, and hopefully that'll slow cars down. And like we discussed earlier, we're also going to entertain kind of reconfiguring that intersection a little bit so that you're not able to just blast straight from McGavick onto Maxey, but more have to bend around and make a turn, like you would any other street. So I'm optimistic between those two things, we should have, some improvements to the way people are driving. The gravel issue is an interesting one, though, and I'd be curious. Do you know if that's coming from like a public alley or is it like a
It's
private
coming
road?
from the back of those two restaurants,
Mhm.
and they pour gravel. They gravel it in the holes, and then when it rains, it washes down the street. Right now, the street is full of gravels, and when those cars come off McGavick onto Maxey and flying, by the time they hit that curve, they lose its control, and they just, like I said, they done hit that pole several times, been in our yard, and I think it tore up a man's mailbox a little further down because it's just dangerous right there. They just drive too fast because they driving fast on McGavick. When they fork off to Branch, they never slow down. They just keep it moving, and that curve just kind of like you got somebody coming and going, and it can hit a on and going car right there at that curve.
Yeah, understood. For the gravel specifically, that's probably a good thing to let Hub Nashville know about.
Well, they
Right.
had went one time and cleaned it off because we had called and they dug around the side, but it keep coming back because when they fill it up with gravels, the holes in the going into the back of the restaurant, when it rains, it just rush on down the curve and come on the main street in front of the homes.
Yeah, understood. I think all I can do is encourage you to let them know whenever it's an issue, and if it is perceived to be recurring, they might get the message that
Let the restaurants know.
Wasn't
Okay.
pertinent. I think I had another question from Matt, maybe.
Yeah, I think we were just trying to highlight what Ms. Johnson was talking about around the corner, but I think.
Oh, got it. Yeah. I appreciate the effort. I'm not recommended to let folks draw on the slides though. But thank you. Anything else y'all want? I think we were on the ballot zone, and that would be the.
I guess for the ballot, who votes for the schools?
Oh yeah, we send this to Metro Nashville Public Schools. So there is an address. I will say they have yet to actually vote. But yeah, theoretically the school could vote. They do not usually vote though. Any other questions? All right. Well, everyone on the screen right now is both my contact information and the email for kind of the NDOT folks working on this program. If you think of anything or have any additional feedback to share, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll also say that when we mail these ballots out, make sure to talk to your neighbors, sort of let them know what it is. Reason being, they can be pretty easily mistaken as junk mail. So we'll let your council member know when they're on the way. But if for any reason you think you should get one and don't have it, whether it was discarded by mistake or maybe it was just never mailed, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to look up what your unique ID is, and we want everyone to vote who wants to. All right, well, if no one has any other questions or discussion topics, we can go ahead and wrap up. This QR code is for the Traffic Calming website. And then there are, of course, a few different social media options for staying in touch with NDOT. But yeah, really appreciate y'all's time. We're excited to get this project moving along, and thanks for sharing your feedback.
David, one last question, and also
Sure.
just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to meet with us. We really appreciate the effort that's gone on and the effort to bring the ideas forward, both your effort and others who are working on it. But where in that process is there would we expect to understand if the design has changed? Is that after the visit out here, and will we be notified of the when you guys are out here visiting and taking a look at the area? Because I'm a little bit concerned that the solution doesn't really address some of the concerns about the corner and doesn't address like some of the other larger vehicles that have a tendency to speed down the street. And I'd want to make sure that feedback is heard and incorporated if it can be.
Sure. Yeah, so there are a couple options. The second meeting we talked about, we can also just kind of stay in touch and keep you and the council member posted if you'd like, just sort of on how that design is progressing. We don't usually schedule the site visits ahead of time, just because they can be fairly tight to sneak in, just with schedules, and then the weather, of course, is a factor that we consider when deciding to head out here. But those aren't incredibly interesting, I will say. We generally just take our grade measurement tool and wheel and sort of roll around for an hour or two, make sure we understand the physical scene there. So if nothing else, you would know what the final design is when it's posted online. But then we can also, keep in touch before then if a second meeting isn't desired. beforehand.
Okay,
Did you get my email address?
I did. I made a
Jay?
note of it.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Cool. And just so you know, we will consider tables. That sort of 16 to 21 foot width range is peculiar at the very least. So we may not only do cushions here, but we'll take a look and see what we can do. And then I think the only other thing about the design that has potential to change is whether or not we do something up here with the McGavick and Maxey Lane intersection. It's an idea that I like, but I don't yet know if there's anything I'm not aware of that would prevent us from doing that. All right. Well, once again, everyone, thank you very much for your time this evening. And yeah, like I mentioned, feel free to stay in touch. You've got my contact info. All right, we'll end the meeting.